We've all heard stories about haunted video games, lost episodes of beloved cartoons or TV shows. But there's always been a medium that, until recently, seems to have been immune to such tales. The humble comic book. Now before you ask, I don't for 1 second believe that there is a massive conspiracy or hidden reason for the event that I'm about to share with you. I think what happened was an example of something that has no reason, no grand scheme. It simply happened. I hope it never happens again. So, what happened? I'll tell you. I'm a collector of DC Comics, and as such, I've always had a soft spot for Superman. Anyone who's into comics knows that some titles go into dark and disturbing imagery, so when strange or gruesome things happen or occur, I most rightfully dismiss it as part of the story. This is how I first reacted when I got my hands on what I now believe to be a new Superman title named No Heroes. The cover was completely black, and the Superman logo was broken and decayed looking. Again, I thought this was a part of the story. I had already flipped through a few pages before purchasing, and to my surprise it was fairly standard Superman book, so I bought it without much thought. Taking it home with me, I sat down and began to read the comic in more detail. As soon as I opened it up, I was greeted with artwork that was distractingly different from what I had seen at a glance in the store. Everything had a red tint to it, and the characters were all angry and battered looking. Superman especially looked extremely menacing, and as I first read the title appearing on the speech bubble, I admit I was pretty shocked. This was not marked as a mature title, and DC had until fairly recently been pretty uptight about how Superman was and was not portrayed, making what I read pretty confusing to say the least.
Heroes are not real. It's all fake. Everything's a fucking lie. People aren't going to save you. They'll watch you bleed. You deserve to die. Life is a fatal disease, which slowly eats us away. You're not perfect. You're no hero.
Again and again, I'd read this dark, mysterious lines. It wasn't unusual for dramatic works such as comics to add moments like this, but as I continued to read, I couldn't help but feel that this was very off for a Superman book. Not a single word of encouragement or hope was found. Our titular hero just kept silent as everyone around him spewed forth messages of hate and despair. The artwork grew increasingly disturbing with each new page until eventually I began to question if this was some kind of joke. Superman walked down the streets of Metropolis and observed the rotting bodies of many heroes and villains from the comic books. To my surprise, some of the characters were not even DC owned. After a while, the story grew violent, as Superman began to destroy what was left of Metropolis, and the destruction more graphic than normal, even in the most extreme editions of the comic. Soon Metropolis was destroyed, and a 2-page panel depicted the carnage, bodies lying on the street, what looked like children impaled on spikes, formed by debris and figures hanging lifelessly from nooses, tied to street lamps and signposts. Finally, the comic ended with a full panel page of Superman, staring directly ahead as if looking at the reader, a speech bubble prominently stating,
"For years of watching us suffer, now it's your turn, hero."
I don't quite understand what that meant, and at the time I was still a bit disturbed by the whole comic, so promptly putting the thing away and never giving it a second glance. After such a horrid comic, I decided I needed a change of pace, so I got out one of my old Batman comics. The old and goofy version of The Dark Knight most people hate, but I somewhat ashamedly had always rather enjoyed. I read the comic, its old humor and camp style refreshingly different from the horror and misery of No Heroes. This is how I always remember the classic DC. Fun and enjoyable. I got halfway through the comic, and had just opened a new page when my eyes grew wide with shock. I almost dropped the comic as I saw, to my utter disbelief, a full-page panel of Superman in that disturbing art style, and staring once again from the comic page a prominent speech bubble stating,
"You don't get to be happy. Hero,